Hello everyone, welcome to part 4 of Lab Assignment 4. This is the part where we're actually just going to look at the Rhino site modeling exercise. So here you'll find the file to download. This is the base file. It's a DWG, which is usually what you'll get, and this is what it looks like. This is what you'll usually get from when you're extracting data from a GIS output, something like this. Take a quick look here at the sort of layer structure. This is, every sort of different mapping agency probably uses different sort of standards for the layers, but this is what they generally look like. They're not very explicit, and so we'll kind of look at how to filter that as we go along. But I just wanted you to take a look at what the original DWG file looks like, and in particular, I'm going to point out that this file has these, which are these sort of thick lines that you can specify in AutoCAD, both for the boundaries here and there. And this is something that sometimes will cause some trouble, and you just want to know how to dial this sort of thing out. Okay? So if you create a new file in Rhino, right? Now the most important thing, especially when you're starting to work with real-world units, and scale is to know what unit your file is in. Now if I go back to the AutoCAD file and let's type units, oops, here you'll see that this actually is in inches, right? I think this was probably rescaled for laser cutting or whatever, and that's why we got this in inches. But usually for a sort of larger map like this, the sort of unit should be in feet. So let's check this really quick, but now we know it's in inches. But since this is something we're familiar with, this is the architecture building, right? I am just going to measure this really quick, distance. The sort of bottom half from here to here. 911, blah blah. So I just want to know in inches how much that really is. And actually, let's run units again, and I'm just gonna change this to decimal really quick. So when I get the measured output, it gives it to me in pure numbers. So this is roughly, right now, roughly 120 inches. Sure, I could have kind of like done that, feet inches conversion earlier. I'm just lazy. So this is roughly 120 inches, which I know for a fact, more or less, that this in real life is 120 feet. So we know that at least for this file that the inches are actually feet, so it's been scaled, by 12 basically. Okay, but as long as we know this sort of source file, the AutoCAD file, is in inches, then we know what we want to do with the Rhino file. So here, I just want to make sure, and same thing, units, type units into the command bar to get to the units. And okay, so you'll see this file as, when I opened it, my default was set to centimeters. So I'll actually change it to match the source file first. So change this to inches as well. Say OK. Now because there's nothing in your file yet, so it will just do the conversion. It'll just change your units automatically. If you have geometry in the scene, then it will ask you about scaling and all of that. Okay, so we're not going to save or make any changes to this. As long as we know this AutoCAD file was in inches, you eventually want to convert that into feet. Okay, so file, import, and let's go find that AutoCAD file. It's somewhere here. Okay, so it's this guy, UF Rights Area Building Map. And so in here, you'll see some of the settings. I don't actually know if this is ticked by default, but I just want to, I'll just tick it to kind of show you what it does. You'll see that when I import it, remember those sort of fat lines that I showed you earlier? these fat lines actually get imported as these sort of surfaces, right? Which is kind of annoying because that was just a graphic thing, but then here it's become geometry. So obviously that's actually something that you do not want, okay? So make sure, and I'm just going to undo that and redo the import. So make sure, and just navigate to wherever you have this file saved. It's a DWG, open. Make sure that this is unticked, okay? And you can ignore thickness as well. So I just don't do that anyways. And just say, okay. Okay, so if you've done it that way, then you'll see that these actually come in as simple lines. Okay, and that's what you want. You don't want the sort of fat line representation. Okay, I'm actually going to move to the top view just to make things a little bit easier. Now, the next thing I do, usually when I import something like this, is that you'll see that this might have been imported somewhere else, sort of flying off in space. And I just want to move this closer to the origin point. So I select everything and move, and spacebar. And it doesn't have to be precise, just like somewhere in the sort of lower left corner. I click once, and then I enter 0. When it asks me for the point to move to up here on the upper left, just 0 and then enter. And what that does, and I'll just zoom back to it, what that does, it actually puts all of your geometry close to the origin point. Now there is one big reason for this, is that the closer you are to the origin point, the more accurate the geometry is. The further away you are, the sort of file accuracy actually goes down, as you can see in this sort of absolute tolerance sort of setting, right? And you just want to kind of, basically the closer you are to here, the more precise your overall geometry and model will be. Okay, so this is something I always do with this. Okay, so now you have this imported correctly. What we want to do is actually change the unit size without scaling the model, because we know, and I'll just do a quick distance measure, that this wants to be, right now it's almost 120 inches, and we basically want to replace the inches with feet, right? So we want to change the units of the file, but not the model itself, right? Okay, not the sort of geometry itself. So what you will want to do is to type units. Oops. Okay. And in the model units, change the units to feet. Say OK. And when it asks you to scale, which will basically scale the model down, say no. And so you'll see that nothing changed, right? But your units have gone from inches to feet. And if I go down here and measure this segment of the architecture building, it's almost 120 feet. Okay? If you had let it scale it, then it would get really small, and then all of your sort of units would have been basically gone converted. Okay? So this is just sort of setting up the file so you know it's the right size, it's the right scale, and when you start shooting stuff, things will look right. So let's save that. Okay. All right. So as you can see on the side, there's all these layers. It's sort of a pain to kind of sort through all that stuff. Okay, so you're at a point where actually you need to kind of sort through all the layers and the data. You want to either delete or hide stuff that you don't really need, and you want to kind of determine what's more critical, right, to like this sort of model that you're building. So not all this information is really necessary. And so you have to kind of sort through and filter all that information. Now there are a few shortcuts that I use. First off, I like to clean off the layer structure, which means at first I will just run a command called the purge command. and I'll purge everything. So you just say OK or enter, spacebar, right click, they're all the same thing. And it will basically delete any layers that do not have stuff in them, right? So a lot of those sort of layers just disappeared. And then go from there, right? And so, for example, there's stuff like this, right? That's like, this is just text. I don't really need text in my file unless you're trying to label things. You can just sort of turn things like this off. So if you type layer, you'll get sort of a lot of the sort of layer related commands, right? Now the one that I'm really looking for here is this guy, the one layer off. Okay, so if you run one layer off and you'll select an object on the layer to turn off, so like let's say this text layer, I just want to turn it off. Alright, so you'll see that automatically on the right side in the sort of layer, this guy got turned off. Right? And this one, for example, I'm just repeating this command by right clicking, and then so it runs, it duplicates or runs again the command you just ran earlier. I might turn like this off, I don't need that. And I probably don't need like this sort of small parking stuff. And just sort of like look at the overall picture and say, well, you know, is that too much? Am I hiding too much? And you can undo, just Control Z to bring that back if that's something that you just sort of accidentally turned off, right? But if you right click in, it will repeat not the undo command, but the command that you ran before the undo, right? So it's sort of handy. So let's just do that. Okay. So I'm starting to clean some of the stuff out. I don't need this sort of yellow layer. Just to sort of clarify what's really necessary, right? What's this? Oh, it's a revision cloud. Yeah, take that out. Okay. Now, for the purposes of this exercise, we're just going to sort of focus on this sort of central block, so you don't have to worry about these, but just the block that's sort of around the sort of the greenscape around the rights union, this sort of central area, right? And the sort of landscape that it encompasses. Okay. Now, usually, what I try to do at this point is basically, there's going to be a bit of back and forth in terms of just sort of organizing. Organizing things, and actually, I want to turn that off. Organizing things and sort of actually, in this case, like I can highlight things and move it down. So I like to actually try sometimes to actually group the unused layers together, right? So what I'll do is actually make a new layer and say, this is unused stuff. And I don't like to, sometimes if I can help it, I don't like to delete stuff out of the file. So I'll highlight things like this and I'll just like drag it into it. Okay? So these guys that have been, just be careful not to accidentally turn things on again. So this is layer. By not clicking so close over there, but just like staying on the name over here. And like highlighting them together, holding down the shift key, right? So pick the first one, hold down the shift key, pick that one. So I'll just sort of drag and drop them over here. Do the same, that. Okay, so that makes it easy for me to like collapse and hide or even just like lock the layers that I'm not going to use. Okay, now we have to determine what are the main things we're looking at here. First of all, actually, there's going to be some landscape, but the real thing we were looking at is actually trying to extrude these masses, right? And so this layer is actually the one that is most important to us. So basically I want to leave this layer on so I can do some stuff to it, right? These are the extrusions that we'll eventually work with. One of the ways to kind of check is just like click on it and go to the properties and say, okay, this is on layer 16, right? And so you know that that's on layer 16. So layer 16 is this guy. I usually will, at this point, I will rename it, right? So this is buildings. Oops. Okay, and click outside of it, just so you know, right, those are buildings, right? Now you can highlight it here, and just right click, and say one layer on, and that turns everything off except for the layer that you selected, right? I don't know what that is. It's probably like a block or something. So sometimes this doesn't affect some of the block properties. Oh, actually this is on the same layer, it just has a different display color. So you can come here and just change it to my layer instead. Okay, so at this point, what I'd like to do, and these are the building outlines that we're going to extrude, right? Now, you'll find that there are cases where, like this, things aren't actually joined together, right? So you'll have trouble when you're actually extruding that. So what I do is it's good to kind of like just click through and get a sense of things, right? Are things, joined correctly? If not, right? Now, I can go through and join these one by one, right? So I'll select one and type join and click the next one, and you'll see sometimes you have like trouble like this because whoever drew this AutoCAD file, maybe the ends weren't joined correctly, so they're just off by a little bit. So if you try it on, let's say this for example, okay, that one just joined correctly because these were actually touching, right? So that works. Now, there's sort of actually a quick way to actually initially do this is to just select everything like that and just join everything. Okay, so I just did J, and it'll tell you like it closed some and there's some that are still open. So there are ones like this that initially didn't work, are still not going to work. But if there are ones that were sort of on top of each other or they're like connected, then it will connect them. You'll run into things like this where like that's drawn correctly, this you don't know what the hell is happening here. So you'll have to fix that later on. But this, for example, to fix this, usually I use you use one side of this as the basis, right? Then you use the other side. And you actually turn on the edit points for this guy, okay? So what you want to do is use the F10. I'm actually just going to use the edit point on command. It's the same thing, F10. And it'll turn on the endpoints for these things, right? So you just drag this away and click on it, the curve edit point, and drag it back so it snaps, right? And if there's like an extra one like that, that means that there were two really close points, one on top of each other. You can just delete one of them. So I just deleted it. So same thing, sort of drag it out and click on it. Okay, there's 2 points, and that's why if I kind of zoomed in, then you would see, okay, this is why someone got screwed up, right? So you can delete one of them, zoom out a little, and just drag this and snap to the other one. So that will basically ensure that, okay, we're snapping, things are touching. Okay, escape out to edit, to come out of the edit point. Now you can join these and they will close correctly. Okay, so and the other sort of quick thing for you to kind of check at this point, and because all the other layers are off, and this is actually an easy way to do this, a more efficient way to do this, is I will go to your sort of selection filters here, pull this out, right? One of the sort of filters here is really useful in the select curves. You'll find, okay, you can select different types of curves, open curves versus closed curves. So this actually, and I'll just pull this out so it's easier to kind of see. So these, you can basically say, oh, well, where are my closed curves? If you select them, then you know, okay, these are all closed curves, so these you won't have any trouble with, right? It's sort of easy for you to kind of visually see which ones you have to fix. All the open ones are here, right? So instead of like going through clicking and trying to find out that way, then you'll see, okay, well, these are the ones that, when I try to extrude them, I might have a problem with, okay? So we'll sort of like be doing this sort of fixing curves process as we kind of go around, and I'll show you a couple, probably kind of do a couple of them just to show you how I do tend to fix things like that, and but we'll do that in the next video.